So we're back on the Mother Tree Network with our beautiful, amazing guest, Gabrielle Cerberville, who is also known as the Chaotic Forager on Instagram. So, Gabrielle, you talked to me earlier about sound dinners, and
Oh, yeah.
you're such an interesting person that you're combining food and sound and nature. So, talk to us about that.
I feel like it's kind of like when you're a kid and you have different friend groups and you just want all of your friends to come over at the same time. I feel like that's my whole art practice. I just want to play with all my friends at once. So I uh in the let me see, it was the summer of 2021. I was invited to an artist residency in Port Austin, Michigan, which is right up in the thumb, right on Lake Huron. It's a beautiful area. And I decided that what I wanted to do for that residency was something called a sound dinner. So I decided I was going to collect field recordings and forage for food in the same locations over the course of about 2 weeks, and that it was all going to culminate in this dinner where I would write a basically like hour and a half long uh like album almost with like several tracks, and that I would combine that with a 9 course dinner made of all the things that I gathered.
Okay, Gabrielle,
Yeah.
first of all,
Mhm.
an hour and a half album, that's long. And then a 9 course dinner.
Yes, I
Okay.
work well under pressure. So I and of course it's all self-inflicted pressure. So every time I complained about it, I was just like, I have nobody but myself to blame for this. But
Three
I
courses would have worked for me.
I have too many dessert ideas. I can't fit them all into 3
Oh,
courses. I love
dessert
Yeah,
ideas.
I love desserts. And so it became a whole production, and it grew and grew, and it involved like collecting objects as well, and collecting trash and creating this whole table display, and I went all in with it. And it was great. It was in June, so the strawberries were in season, so I was picking wild strawberries on the beach. There were just like so many beautiful sounds to pick up. It was a really lovely area. I drove around, I got all these sounds, I got all this food. I wrote new recipes. Everything was foraged, except for like, sugar and flour. But I I made this meal, and I it was all done in 2 weeks. I managed to pull it off, and then 1 minute before we were supposed to start, a tornado hit that knocked out the power in that area for 2 weeks. So I went from having this great setup, I had my PA system all set up, I had the dinner, everything was ready to go, and then suddenly, like, nobody was there because everybody was checking on their houses, and we had to delay by a couple of hours, but we ended up doing it by candlelight in this beautiful barn attic. And we borrowed a speaker from somebody's car that was Bluetooth, so it didn't have to be plugged in, and we made it work, and it was great. But then the following year in 2022, I decided I wanted to continue the project, and I wanted to do it in a different place. So I did a whole new album. I did a whole new dinner, new recipes in a place called United Plant Savers in Ohio, which is just south of Athens.
I know them.
You know them?
I know someone who's a part of
I
that.
love them. They have a residency that they actually call the Deep Ecology Residency. So my deep ecology project fit perfectly there. So they have a 10-day residency. So then I had to take my 9 courses and my hour and a half of music, and I had to do it all in 10 days instead of 14. But that one went much better because there was no tornado and I had power and a kitchen that worked. So It was great. I had a fabulous time there. United Plant Savers is the best forever and always, and I'm hoping to do more of these dinners. Maybe I'll give myself more time in the future so I won't have to cram it all into 2 weeks and maybe I can sleep.
Well, if you had your druthers, Gabrielle, so now we're gonna think beyond what exists currently, but if you had your druthers, what would people do differently or think differently about nature and music or about humans and nature and music?
Oh my god, the most important thing that I wish people could get on board with is the idea that we are nature. We evolved alongside all of these things that we see as nature, and it was not until quite recently that a relatively small subset of the world decided that human beings were superior to and should therefore be separate from nature, and that nature was a resource to be used by humans who are decidedly not nature. For thousands of years, human beings have worked with nature in order to survive, in order to thrive, and in order to keep balance. When you look at the various ecologies of North America, it is apparent there is the signature of indigenous people is everywhere in how fire was used to control and manage ecosystems, how herds of buffalo would had a clear path to go where they needed to go, how they had grasslands. Like that was human intervention that allowed for those ecosystems to thrive and exist. It has not been very long that this anthropocentric idea that we should conquer nature has been in place. And I think the best way to recognize that we are part of nature is to see just how well we can live while relying on nature.
Hmm. What do you mean by that? Relying on nature?
So, for me, I rely on the natural world to supply a lot of the food that I like.
Hmm.
So I rely on nature. I rely on certain trees being in an area in order to find the mushrooms that I like. I rely on blueberry bushes to be there year after year so that I can continue harvesting blueberries. I rely on that patch of ramps to be there year after year and for the soil to remain relatively undisturbed in order to keep eating that food that has become a part of my diet. Um, and if let's say there's a piece of land in your city that is undeveloped, there's no building on it. Maybe it's a wetland. And a developer might look at that and say, I could put a bank there. And then that place will become valuable. What I am proposing is that if we learn what is on that land and who is on that land, it is already valuable because that is no longer just a barren piece of land that has yet to be developed.
Quote,
It is
virgin.
fully, yeah, it is fully developed with what is growing on it and who is living on it. That is valuable. So if I know that that's the place where I pick blueberries, then maybe I am more inclined to care about it. Maybe I'm more inclined to care for it. If I know that my backyard produces, XYZ plants or mushrooms or whatever, then maybe I care less about the lawn and I care more about you know, rehabituating it to wild plants that are good for pollinators, that are good for birds and other animals, and that are also good for me as a part of nature.
Mm, wow. Thank you for inviting us into that vision and that way of
Mhm.
being that was here
Yeah, it
not too long
is.
ago.
Yeah. It's unfortunate, I think that a lot of the uh A lot of sort of what people have perceived in the past several years about foragers and foraging is it's a very white male dominated field. And we have like so many wonderful people to thank for shifting that narrative, people like Alexis Nicole. I can think of other like wonderful female foragers and foragers of color, and some really lovely, respectful white males who do forage, like my friend Sam Thayer. Um, and there is this idea that foragers are resource driven. They are still capitalists. They are just, doing it in nature instead of doing it with money. There's a lot of resource hoarding. There's a lot of greed, unfortunately, in foraging. And I think what a lot of us want to see happen is we want people to realize that there is an abundance of food. There is just so much out there, and that doesn't mean that we need to take everything that's out there. It means that we can invite others into this way of life, because more foragers means more people to steward what is there, to protect it and nurture it. More people to clean up trash in otherwise abandoned areas that have not received like human love in a long time.
Mm, mm. Wow, powerful. Thank you for that vision of abundance and generosity. Thank you for doing your incredible creative work, blending food and music and sound. We appreciate you. And if people want to follow you or stay in touch with you, what do you want? Where do you want them to, how do you want them to be in touch with you?
Yeah, so you can find me on all socials as Chaotic Forager. And I also have two different websites. I really need to start integrating that more because I have a website for my music and a website for my foraging stuff. But you can either find me at chaoticforager.com or gabriellecerberville.com.
Beautiful, Gabrielle. Well, I hope to be able to hear more of your music and feature that next time we get together.
Sounds great. Thank you so much.
You're welcome.